Well, welcome everyone, and thank you everyone for attending this free public seminar for the Australian Sports Brain Bank. My name's Michael Buckland, and I'm the Director of the Sports Brain Bank. John's the guy that organised most of it. Thank you, John. We'll have some acknowledgements at the end. Thank you for attending. Well, we have in the audience today some ex-athletes. We have some reporters as well, and this event will be live streamed. So I just want to let you guys know, everyone know that this is very much a public event. But we still hope that we're able to provide some information and also a space where people can ask questions either about themselves or their families or people that they may know, so they can really start to advance everyone's understanding of what is turning out to be an interesting problem here in Australia, similar to the USA. Before we go any further, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. That's the Gadigal and Wongal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and all Aboriginal people here today. I am going to finish up now and introduce our MC, who is Adrian Cohen, who will be making sure that the rest of the talks run to time. So, Adrian, thank you for doing your bit. Hello there, I'm Dr. Adrian Cohen. I do understand there are some students in the audience, so as Michael said, you can put your pens down and listen, because it's all going to be online, and that's the way you people learn these days anyway, let's be honest. And we do want your full attention. It's a very interesting afternoon this afternoon with some people who have given up their time and in some cases their humility to be here as well. It's really important that they're able to tell their story and to interact with the community at large, so you get to hear what they have to say. So right now, here's a man that needs no introduction. Peter FitzSimons is one of Australia's best-known raconteurs. You'll be hearing from him shortly. He tells a great yarn, he's lived it, and he writes about it as an amateur athlete back in the day, and a professional journalist. Chris Nowinski from the US, he's come a long way. He arrived yesterday morning. It's quite a long flight, and he's managed to keep his brain sharp enough to tell some good stories during dinner, which is always a positive, and tells us that he's on point for today. And of course, Michael Buckland, who is the power behind the institution that we're here to celebrate today, the Australian Sports Brain Bank. And Michael's the one that actually does the work behind the microscope. And that's the key to all of this, because without that knowledge, we can't educate the public, we can't change attitudes, and we can't advance the science that's so obviously needed in this country and elsewhere in the world. And we want to collaborate with the rest of the world as well. We don't exist as an island, except on that map where we're next to Austria. We're also going to have a couple of panel discussions and discuss something that's fairly personal, which is how you live with the end results of chronic brain damage that at autopsy we call chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. Now, long before you end up in Michael's lab, you're living with a family, often with a partner, with colleagues and friends, and they may be the first people that actually witness what's going on in the way you present yourself to the world. And we have some of them here today to tell their stories and to share their experiences with you. To bring it back to something we all love, which is to say sport, we've also got a number of athletes from across different disciplines who are going to tell their experience firsthand and also answer your questions about what's going on. So we'll do that in two panel discussions. And at the very end, we'll wrap up with any other questions you might have, any burning issues that you felt weren't addressed. Clear so far? Anybody on call that needs to have a phone available for immediate medical emergency? I just noticed next door there was a lot of nursing mothers who'd gone through the RPA system. Anyone expecting a child? No? Then you can turn your phones off. I think you'll last the next hour and a bit. Back to Peter. Peter has authored a number of books. He writes a regular column in the paper. He's an ever-presence on television. And way back in the day, he actually represented our country in football. He feels passionately about the issues around what's happening in terms of player welfare in sport, about concussion, and he has got the intelligence and the acumen to look behind the headlines and into the science. Let's get him to share some of that with us.
Okay, so thank you. Terrific to have so many people here. I think we call ourselves stakeholders or whatever we are. We're people interested in concussion. I do not come to this podium with great expertise in concussion, but fairly wide experience. And the worst of those experiences was about 100 yards that away on St John's Oval. I couldn't say exactly when, but I think it was the 3rd of May, 1981. And we were playing, Wesley College was playing against St Paul's College. I came out the back of the ruck, the try line beckoned. I never saw him coming. A footballer who'll remain nameless, let's just call him Michael Cripps. And he hit me with a perfectly 100% legal tackle. A brilliant tackle, put his shoulder into me, and my head just whiplashed, just hit. And I came to 2 minutes later singing a Bob Dylan song, and they took me here, just to PA, just behind me, and they, sort of did the assessments and the rest of it. And I was a bit vague for the next, I suppose, week. I probably played the next Saturday. That was my first major concussion. While after that, I'd got in a test match, I got completely knocked out again. Played the game of my life because I was so angry, not aware of the danger that I was facing of the second impact syndrome. Before that, I'd played American football in Ohio back in 1978, where I never got knocked out. But you had the constant white sparkle of the helmets clashing and in the training and so forth. So I had a long background of subconcussive impact, I think they call it, and later on actually getting knocked out. But never thought about it because in my naivety of footballers at the time, we thought the only people that could get hurt by concussion were boxers. They were the ones. They were the ones because we somehow felt that the brain, stupid looking back upon it, would know the difference between a fist that had a boxing glove around it, that really hurt, but if we got a knee or we got a shoulder in the head, no problem, we're footballers. That was our naivety, and I didn't think much about it and wrote my sports stories and the rest of it. But about 15 years ago, middle of the 5 or 6 years after the turn of the century, reading the New York Times every day, I started to become aware of this growing thing in America, the CTE, the issue of NFL footballers suing and the rest of it. Became interested in it. 2013, in the most haunting story I've ever done, Channel 7 Sunday night program sent me to America, went to Virginia, and I'll never forget interviewing. We had the foremost brain expert in America who was there, but before we got to him, I interviewed with the cameras rolling. His name was John Hilton, and he was the most fearsome linebacker in America, 1969 to 1972, a physically beautiful man like Charlton Heston, 70 years old, and we're talking to him, and it was like being in a car on an AM radio south of Wollongong, moving towards Sydney, coming in and out of lucidity, and he could talk sense, and then he wasn't talking sense. And the brain neuropathologist said to him, John, is it 1993? Is it 2003? Is it 2013? He had no idea. Talking to him and talking about his experience, I said, oh, gee, John, it must have been brutal back then, back when you were playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he was lucid and he started crying and he said, it was brutal. It was brutal, and it had scrambled his brains. And talking to his wife about her experience, absolutely appalling. I was shocked by the whole thing, stumbled down the doorway, and at the moment I had privacy with the neuropathologist, said, well, look, I've got to tell you, I wouldn't talk to you before, but look, I played a lot of football for about 20 years, but I write a best-selling book every year, so I guess I'm okay, am I? Wanting him to give me a hug and say, son, of course you're okay. And he said, no. How old are you? I said, I'm 51 years old. He said, well, we wouldn't know for a few years from now. The cameras roll, I do the interview, and I thought, I'll give this bastard another chance. So I said, look, for every 100 footballers that have experience like me of running into other guys for 10 or 20 years, how many out of 100 would you say would have what you call brain damage? This guy said, 100%, 100%. And he said, your brain is a bowl of jello floating around in a bucket of bones. And the natural music to go with that is Brahms' symphony. Floating. And it's not meant to be rock and roll. And he made the point that it's not natural for your brain to hit against the side of your skull. And what level of extraordinary naivety is it to think that we can play these games, not get damage and come out the other end without damage? So I've pushed it in the Herald ever since, the need for protocols. I don't say shut down football by any means. I think that what's necessary is to begin with that all junior footballers of whatever gender, of whatever football, are raised on the idea, if in doubt, sit it out. And talking to Chris Nowinski when we did that same thing and went up to Boston and saw the whole brain bank, was very, very impressed by how advanced it was. And it must have been in 2014, Enid, that my former football coach, Barry Taylor, Tizza Taylor, very well-known, well-loved rugby coach, coached me at the Australian under-21s and then New South Wales. I became aware that he had issues of dementia, that when he sadly died, I called Enid and said what chance we could extract Barry's brain and send it to Boston. And she agreed, and we did, and it was all done within the space of 24 hours. I think it was in an ice esky on its way to Boston. Can I tell you the results, how bad? So the results that came back were that Barry, who'd been fine till late 50s, at 58, started to leave the reservation and had to be put in an institution. And as I said in the Sydney Morning Herald, of all the people of all the world that were least likely to have their brain studied for science, it was probably Barry Taylor. But he did. It was a great service that he and his family did, because the answer that came back was that it was one of the worst 5 I think that they'd ever seen in Boston, which helped explain why the man you loved and your father, Stephen, and the rest of it, why it had happened. And so since that time I've worked with the Sports Brain Bank. I'm not sure if I'm a patron or an ambassador, one of those two. I help make phone calls and help publicise the idea, and it's been terrific, the people we've had who've come forward, who've done it. I'm very passionate on the idea of protocols. So a lot of the football codes most of the football codes have embraced these protocols. My own sport of rugby union is not by any means blemish free on this. The one that I remember, third test, 2011, I think it was, Wallabies versus the Lions, and George Smith, that'll be George now. George Smith got hit in the head, and as he came up, as he's leaving the field, he got hit on the right side, and his left foot was doing what they call snake dancing, which is tremors, like moving like this. And I got contacted by a neuro expert on the Monday saying what happened there was absolutely classic brain trauma. He went off, he got an HIA, and he came back on 5 minutes later and played the rest of the game. And so there was a protocol. We see it in rugby league all the time. Less lately, but for the last few years. Sports embrace the protocol. The next step is to actually make the protocols count for something. So as I understand it, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is it not that the HIA is only applied should there be any doubt that this is concussion? And so what you see, there's a particular episode that I remember seeing where a footballer gets hit by one of his own teammates, just a shocking elbow, not totally accidental, gets an elbow to the side of the head, goes down, doesn't move, and lies face down, twitching for about a minute or two. Then they sort of rouse him, and they don't give him smelling salts, but the trainer asks him a few questions, gives the thumbs up to the coach, and he plays on. And so as I wrote in the Herald at the time, we're doing this assessment to see if he's got concussion. We've seen him hit in the head. We've seen him lie face down. We've seen him twitching. And after this assessment, we've come back with the answer, it's not concussion. As I said in the Herald, what the fuck was it? Was it flu? And this is the stuff that has to stop. So, football to go on, but football to be played more safely than it was. It's terrific to have Colin Scotts here, who I think will speak. Jeff Fennick, it's wonderful that you put your weight and your name behind that this has to be taken seriously. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for your attention. I'll be back on the panel. Thank you.
When Peter says he'll be back on the panel, he does, of course, mean the Channel 7 show that his wife appears on from time to time.